Hello, I'm Chris Kowronski from Berlin Practical Philosophy International Forum, and I would like to talk today during our Stoic Pragmatism Open Seminars online, the second edition, about the meaningful life. At the very beginning, I would like to ask a couple of questions that seem to me very essential here while discussing the problem. So the first question is, or the first issue is, do we construct meaning in life or do we discover meaning in life? What's the difference? If you discover something, you assume that this something you are looking for, the meaningful life in this case, is something ready over there. And the main challenge for us is to get to that meaningfulness or meaningful life, or this element that will make our life meaningful. So the only thing is just awaiting or perhaps doing something to discover what is already there. Constructing or creating meaningful life is that we do not have this assumption that there is something already given over there, but we have to create this. Perhaps not create everything that may be important or essential for meaningful life, but at least the most important elements. So it is our activity, our attitude, our energy, our action that actually construct the meaning. So this is the difference. So it is not so clear for many people if we discover meaningful life or meaningfulness or something that makes meaningful life meaningful, or rather we construct it. So this is the issue number one. The issue or question number two is, when we are using so many phrases or words about similar phenomena, what is the relationship amongst them? Maybe we are talking about the same thing when we are talking about the meaningful life, the good life, happy life, successful life, and maybe something else. I think there is a difference, and I will talk in a second about this difference, but at the very beginning, I would like to propose the idea for consideration that, for example, successful life does not have to mean, it may, but it does not necessarily mean meaningful life or happy life. The third issue I would like to discuss is the risks of meaningless life. That if we, this is the assumption, if we do not think seriously about this problem, we are risking of having meaningless life, and this meaningless life may be risky again in the long run. What are the risks? I will tell you, or I will suggest in a minute. Meaningful life and mental health issues. This is interconnected with the point number three, that meaningless life may result with some problems connected with our disorientation, what to do in life, what is important, what is not important, what should we, or about what we should fight for or not. So one of the risks probably would be some kind of mental issues, and I'm not talking about mental as a kind of illness, but having a feeling of something that we are losing, or perhaps being uncomfortable, or perhaps disorganized in life, and having a sense of emptiness in life. And the last thing is a question: should not philosophy offer us visions of the meaningful life, or meaningful lives in plural, as one of its main tasks? This question refers to a more general idea, if especially for non-religious people who probably, if they are religious, they would ask questions or they should look for the answers to these questions in religion or religious traditions. But those who not necessarily are religion-oriented persons may think, hey, apart from religion, we may have philosophy. But what is philosophy and why should it be something important for us? Perhaps maybe philosophy, or one of its main functions, would be to offer us some kind of vision of the good life, or vision of meaningful life. And that's why philosophy might be important. So these are 5 questions, and I would like to start with a general sort of answer to the basic question, and I take it from Stoic Pragmatism way of thinking. And here I'm referring to one of the sources for Stoic pragmatists, that is both William James and Josiah Royce. In some sense, these are thinkers who they were friends and collaborators. And Josiah Royce, writing about William James, he wrote a sentence or a claim that I would like to quote because it seems to be a sort of answer to the first question. So Josiah Royce, while writing about William James, says, "What makes life worth living is not what you find in it, but what you are ready to put into it by your ideal interpretation of the meaning that, as you insist, it shall possess for you." So it is a clear indication that when we are looking for meaningful life or meaning in life, it is rather our activity, our action, our attempt to construct something by ideal or our ideal interpretation of the meaning, and something we would like to insist to be ready to fight for, in a sense, in our lives and promote it amongst others. So this is a sort of answer to the question. Stoic pragmatism stands in John Locke's version. So something like this: there are times in which the pragmatic attitude is inappropriate, and good sense requires that pragmatists believe and act like Stoics. If intelligent pragmatists have to be Stoics from time to time, then pragmatism and Stoicism are not incompatible at all. Here we have the idea that in making our project about meaningful life efficient, we would be maybe more effective in performing or realizing the attitude that would link these two traditions at some point. At some point, it does not mean we have to merge, or it is not really the case that I am promoting the idea of merging Stoicism and pragmatism, or John Locke does do it. No. Here we have the idea that at some points it is more efficient, more effective to take something from the first tradition for the second tradition, and, for example, in the context of meaningful life, trying to be effective in maintaining and realizing some ideas about meaningful life would be both Stoic and both pragmatic. But it does not really matter that it is, technically speaking, both Stoic, both pragmatic. What really matters is that it is efficient in our realization of the meaningful life. This is the idea, the practical philosophy, the practical attitude towards making our life more meaningful, but still the aim is to make the quality of our lives higher or better. This is the aim. So I would like to be understood quite well. This project does not mean that we are trying to unite two different philosophical traditions. This project is about using some elements of these traditions to think if using them in practical life will result with elevating the quality of our living. How? For example, by thinking in Stoic and pragmatic way at the same time about making our lives more meaningful. This is the idea. Here I'm using Eric Weber thoughts about Stoic pragmatism, and he writes the following. I have found that John Locke's Stoic pragmatism to be the most helpful outlook for thinking both about Stoic acceptance of what is beyond our control, combined with a modest yet hopeful optimistic pragmatism about what we might do to be happy despite challenges. So we have sort of confirmation, excuse me, about this, let's say, technical approach to using the philosophical tradition of these two movements and hoping to achieve practical results about the quality of our lives. He continues, the point Lachs makes is that Stoics, like everyone else, do not know all of the reach of the powers. How can you know what you cannot change unless you try? And trying is within one's power. So trying is something that Stoicism can condone, if not endorse, in the effort to determine what is within one's power. Exactly this is the connection between this stoical part and pragmatic part, that Stoicism introduced the idea that we should recognize what is within our control, and this, or in this, or with this, we should be preoccupied, and not with something that we cannot control. We can do or we can contribute to things that we cannot control, but it would be risky to engage, for example, emotionally in things we cannot control because the result does not depend upon us. So we can do something that is out of our control, but maybe with not so big engagement or personal dedication. What we, however, can do is to realize things within our control. And here we can be pragmatic. But a part of the story is that we should first try to do something. Because if we do not try, Weber says, and I agree with this, we don't know if it depends upon us or not. Maybe we know not everything about our possibilities. And as far as what is under our control or might be under our control, maybe we should try. And we may be successful or not successful. But maybe we will be successful in the sense that we are trying, we are pushing, we are doing or exercising some options. And it may turn out that we may have control about such things and we may go on. Especially that we are talking about meaningful life for ourselves and perhaps those we love or those we are responsible for or those we know. So in this context, we may try and try, pragmatically speaking, we can try and see if it works. However, this may be the case of making the area or space of our actions under our control bigger and bigger and bigger. This is the idea, I think. Opening rich and meaningful life opportunities for all is a value in itself and for democracy. Benefits are evident already in the empowerment of fellows who can then pursue different kinds of meaningful lives. Here, the idea is that constructing, creating, maybe fighting for, trying has this democratic or egalitarian, maybe it's a better word, egalitarian component, because it does not refer to just a special group of people or small group of people. Theoretically, at least, we may say that it may refer to everybody, because everybody in some context may try to make life better or of higher quality by this working on meaningful life or making kind of awareness inside us of meaningful life. So it is sort of internal work that does not much depend upon the external situations, especially when we are talking about living or conditions of life in countries like Western countries without war, without terrible things, independent of us. It is a very different story in territories where people are really in very tragic, difficult situation where, for example, there is a war or poverty or things like this. It is a different story. I'm talking about those who do not have to fight in any war. They have more or less regular life, and this group of people, complaining very often, may have this democratic or egalitarian tool by means of which they may think about elevating the quality of their lives. And so this is the idea of Stoic pragmatism and progressing with looking for new opportunities, new attempts, and in this way, making wider, wider, and wider the Stoic, originally Stoic concept of dichotomy. What does depend upon me and what does not depend on me. It may appear that there are things dependent on me. There are many more things dependent on me than I previously thought. And many more people can do it than we previously thought. So this is the idea. Let me get back to John Lachs for a while. He says the following: the good life has three basic conditions or ingredients. We must have desires and purposes. We must be fortunate enough to live in circumstances where they can be satisfied. And we must have the capacity and energy actually to achieve them. Without the convergence of will, luck, and power, the good life is impossible. The lack of power yields envy and bitterness. The absence of will makes existence meaningless. Without luck, life remains a frustrated quest. So here it's a sort of attempt to answer the next question about what is the meaningful life, what's the difference between meaningful life, good life. At this point, we don't have to differentiate these things, although it's a good introduction into realizing that the good life, meaningful life, successful life, happy life, these are the different things. I will continue in a second. But here at this point, we have a sort of proposal to think about the elements or ingredients or components of what we call the good life, partially meaningful life. And as you can see, will, very pragmatic word, will or willingness to do things. Power in the same, in a similar situation, but let me take a look at luck. Luck is something that we may be dependent upon or maybe not. We depend upon luck if we are lucky, if the circumstances are friendly. It is a very different story than the situation where some people are not lucky because the circumstances have been terrible for them. And this is a part of the story. But the pragmatic dimension of this is you may think about preparing yourself just in case you do not have luck. For example, you may, and should be part of your Stoic pragmatist training, you should be aware of the context and circumstances you live in and think about possible dangers or possible misfortunes. And if it is possible, and sometimes it is possible, to prepare yourself before, in advance, by visualizing. Sometimes we can use the term negative visualization. When you visualize or in your imagination possible options that may happen, and you have plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D, depending upon the option that may be realized, and one of these options may be terrible options. So you may prepare in your imagination, but also perhaps by some kind of activities to prepare yourself for the worst case scenario so that when something bad happens, you are already prepared in some way, to some degree at least, to face the situation. So luck is not such an black and white thing. It has complex context around, because if we are active, if we are prepared for some bad situations in advance, if we are lucky or not, really, it does not seem to be very crucial because we are prepared for the bad option. The other thing is when we are not prepared, because, for example, we will not be thinking about terrible options. So luck here is interesting and important, and that's why this this factor here is enumerated as really important for having good life. In my book, I expose or articulate the following idea. It happens that individuals who, having had a successful life, do not have a good life, which means that they, and perhaps their loved ones, were not happy or satisfied with life, even to the point of thinking it empty and meaningless. This is the argument for which the successful life may not imply the same as the good or the meaningful life. So here I indicate the difference, that from time to time it would be nice, profitable, constructive to think that we have many positive terms about life in this positive meaning, but these are different things. You may have meaningful life, successful life, but at some point, they are not the same. And recognition of these differences may be really helpful in the context where some elements of our life do not work. And for example, we are not successful professionally anymore. Does it mean that our life has no meaning? I continue in my book this plot, this trajectory. Stoic pragmatism tends to contextualize the meaning of the successful life within societies that appreciate commonly recognizable indicators of success. Success as an important indicator of achievable goals has a special importance in capitalist contexts, and consumption-oriented communities. It indicates financial achievements of living in the upper social strata of any given society that in fact can and does easily turn into financial success. The term successful life nearly merges with the term successful career, bringing with it a higher income or access to big money for oneself and loved ones. I write about such things because it seems to me very important. Um, in this life or existential context, when we have a successful life understood and successful career or successful professional career, meaning a lot of money and higher social position in social strata or social ladder. And is it the same as meaningful life? And probably for quite a big segment of population, is the same. So meaningful life means a successful life. However, at some point, they may overlap, but at some points they may separate. And if we are not prepared for this option of separation, that we do not have successful life anymore in this, how to say that, not materialistic, but maybe this in the context of having a very good job, high income, social prestige, and so on. And if we lose it for a while, does it mean that our life has no meaning anymore? So it may be kind of dangerous when we're accustomed to thinking that these things are the same. I propose to think about it that, well, it's not the same. It may be very helpful. It may be close to each other. These are not the same things. I would like to dedicate a moment to Lawrence Becker's book and his idea about New Stoicism, which is very close to Stoic Pragmatism. And he says, or writes in his book, A New Stoicism, he writes the following: Stoic moral training aims to develop in each agent the disposition to seek social roles, conventions, and institutions in which she has more rather than less control over her own life, unless having less can be shown to make a countervailing contribution toward a good life for her. So it is, if we take a look, agent and disposition, it is this, it is not, subjective is not a good word, but I would like to say that the Stoic pragmatism idea here about, in the context of meaningful life, has much to do with this area of our subjectivity in the sense of elevating the role of our agency and elevating the role of our disposition or dedication to the realization of, let's call it, project as far as the meaningful life is concerned. And once again, I'm getting back to John Lachs. What does it take for a philosopher to be great? And sorry to interrupt, but why he's asking this question? Because it is an attempt to answer my final question from the first moments of my presentation here. Is it not that we should perhaps look for some hope in philosophy and philosophers? And John Locke is answering yes, actually, philosophy should be more practical and culturally important nowadays by offering us some options of the good life and options for meaningful life. And he says the following: we can sum it up in one word: vision. An integrated, accessible, and attractive view of the whole of things. Such visions offer accounts of the human world and of the nature and role of values in it. making personal orientation possible. Plato portrayed such a vision, as did Spinoza and Kant. Then there were philosophers who had no vision at all, even though they were masters of technique. So here is the suggestion that some philosophers, and he mentioned very eminent philosophers, they offer us some vision of the good life or vision of the meaningful life, and it is a part of the offer that may be important to us. Although there are tons of philosophers who are interested in technicalities, in details, in some issues that regular population will never understand. So what is suggested here, that yes, philosophy can offer us, or some philosophers, or some philosophical ideas or movements can offer us interesting options for the good and meaningful life. Here I'm trying to answer the question about risks of meaningful life. And I'm referring to my book, in which I write the following: meaninglessness has different causes as it has different forms. If we characterize it very broadly, though, as lacking a sense of importance and or of value in one's life, we can see that it may deal with life as a whole or with life at one of its stages. If we assume this meaning of the term, we will see that the importance factor and the value factor are crucial. Perhaps we have dissolved the vitality meaningful, the vital and meaningful in favor of the consumption-oriented meaningful. Taken the roles of clients and or producers and have exchanged the meaningful life into a successful life as a basic model for happiness. This is precisely the point that Stoic Pragmatism wants to address by forcing us to pay attention to the unused opportunities available to us in the contemporary Western culture. Why a sense of meaninglessness is dangerous and may become destructive for us should not be that difficult to answer. It seems to be because sooner or later a meaningless life might become a painful lived experience by living as burnt out, bored, inactive, complaining, frustrated, and unhappy. But it may become also toxic for our surroundings. At the end of my presentation, let me take a look at some related stances. For example, positive psychology stance, and with a sort of attempt to define in a better way what meaningful life is. Meaning in life is an important variable for human well-being. Definitions of meaning comprise two pillars: comprehension and purpose. Comprehension encompasses people's ability to find patterns, consistency, and significance. Purpose refers to highly motivating long-term goals about which people are passionate and highly committed. So it is a sort of contribution to our thinking about the more specific understanding of the definition or what actually we are talking about while thinking or discussing about meaning in life or meaningful life. And finally, I would like to pay attention to a very important, interesting and famous and tragic at the same time experience of Victor Frankl and something that he called logotherapy, or a meaning sentence therapy, because Victor Frankl has created a logotherapeutic method of treating people with problems by means of elevating this meaning as the central point in the therapy. In his famous book, he writes, in logotherapy, the patient is actually confronted with and reoriented toward the meaning of his life. And to make him aware of this meaning can contribute much to his ability to overcome his neurosis. Thank you for your attention.